So I'd love to start with, so it's kind of funny, I've now had 3 Everest films this year I've talked to, all very different, all revolving around potential or interesting relationships with the Sherpas and the Sherpa community. Yours is by far one of the most intriguing and personal stories. How did you come across this story? How did you come across this woman's legacy and kind of catch us up to this film, I guess? As easy as a question that must have been, yeah.
Well, it's a bit of a meandering story. I didn't start as a filmmaker. I had another career, and my sister married a Sherpa man, and we all live in the Bay Area. So one evening, I went to dinner at their house, and Dorji Sherpa told me the story of his sister. And, at this point, I was traveling a ton and doing like merger acquisition stuff. But this story, at my heart, I think, and as a child and all through college, I was a storyteller, I was an artist, and then I just kind of had to support myself and was practical and got a job that paid. And so when he told me the story of his sister, Pasang, I was just really incredibly moved. It was kind of one of those aha moments, if you will, where I felt like this strange connection to her, because she was such a rebel in the society that she grew up in. She was a woman, obviously, in an all-boy family. They lived in this tiny town up in the Himalaya without running water, without electricity. And as a girl, she wasn't allowed to go to school. All her brothers got to go to school. They had to walk 5 miles to go to school, but they still got to go to school. And she didn't like that. She wanted to go to school. She was told she had to have an arranged marriage when she was 15. She said no to her parents and ended up running away with a man that she fell in love with. They ran away to Kathmandu. It was scandalous, and they started their own trekking company. And this is back in the 80s and 90s in Nepal. And what's hard to understand from a 2022 vantage point is just how incredibly courageous that was at the time, and outrageous at the same time, because Sherpas are Buddhist, and they're a minority in Nepali society. Nepal at the time was a Hindu kingdom. Over 90% of the country was Hindu. And Buddhists from the hills. She spoke She spoke Sherpa. She didn't speak Nepali. So when she, went to the city, then she learned Nepali, but she would have spoken it with a heavy country accent. And as a Sherpa, as an ethnic group, the caste system, very prevalent, still is prevalent, but at the time, it was the way society was governed. And as a Sherpa, she was an outcast, completely outside of the caste system. That's where the term comes from. And so, she would have been taught that she couldn't even raise her and make eye contact with government officials. And yet, here's this woman who couldn't read or write. Here's this woman, who with this country accent and who was supposed to be really subservient. She was audacious in the things that she wanted to do, and she ended up deciding that her way of asserting her own power was to climb, because as a Sherpa, that's kind of what they do. And so I was just extremely moved by her as a person and her charisma and her courage. And then to find out that she, tried 4 times. She succeeded in summiting on her 4th attempt, but then she died on the way down. And the circumstances were really tragic. A big snowstorm came in. She and 2 other Sherpa had to bivouac on the south summit, and then in the morning, they were completely out of oxygen. And so the one who was able to go down went down to try to bring oxygen back up to Pasang, and her summit partner, Sonam Sering, he was coughing blood. They couldn't get back to them, and they both died. And the country just erupted because she'd become such a charismatic figure, and she represented, I think, for women there, especially for women of lower caste, ethnic women, indigenous women. She was speaking truth to power, so to speak. I mean, she was doing things that they didn't have the courage to do. So it was just a really emotional story for me, and I carried it around for a little bit, and then I had an opportunity to step out of my job, and I decided I was going to make the film, and that was this 10 plus year roller coaster that I've been on to finish this film. Wonderful and really hard.
And not only for that, you mentioned 80s and 90s, obviously a huge governmental change in that time frame, a war, basically for the country, and to see her change the landscape, pioneer. There's no other way to look at what she was able to accomplish. I'd love to touch upon, you talk about the summit, and in particular the oxygen level issue, which, for those that don't understand the scale of going up Everest, there are these segments, or you hit a summit and you hit a summit and you hit a summit, then you hit finally to rise up to hopefully get to the top. But it is some of the most dangerous terrain on the planet. It's not just the scope of going up, it's the snowfalls change every year. They completely change. You have to literally figure out your way up as you are going up. How harrowing was this for someone like her, even though she grew up in it? The Sherpa community know how deadly this is. There are religious elements to their Buddhism as you go up. There are shrines. This is more than just climbing a mountain. It's life. It's their people. I love that your film shows how much of that was a part of her belief and what she was trying to get to be able to do and showcase. And then I don't know if she ever anticipated how many people would fall in love with her story, but it's got to be heartwarming to know even in death, she's become iconic very much in that community and anyone who knows the story. And thank you for showing more of it out there. I'm curious, as far as the danger of it, can you talk to us about that?
Well, certainly. Many times people describe Everest as not being a technical mountain. It's not like K2, but it's the altitude, and that is so dangerous. And you're right that the route changes a little bit every year, and the big difference is it's again, from a vantage point of today, it's hard to really understand the context of what it was like for her then, because it was completely different. That was the year, 1993, was the first year that there was commercial climbing. That was the advent of commercial climbing. Prior to that, it was all these nationalistic groups, the Korean expedition, the Japanese expedition. It was expert Western international, mountain climbers who came and used Sherpas to help, set the ropes and do all the super dangerous stuff, go across the ice fall millions of times. But so at that time, there weren't these super long lines like there are today. And in that particular year, it was there were lots of folks at base camp, and she decided to go very early for a whole host of reasons. I think I wasn't there. I know what some of the reasons might have been, but they went very early in the season, so the ropes weren't even set. So her team, it was an all Sherpa team. They had to set the ropes. Today they call them, I think they call them the ice doctors. They're these incredibly talented Sherpas who they do that. They go back and forth across the ice fall and set the ropes. And so, but her team was doing that. They were forging ahead with very rudimentary equipment. And that's the other thing that's really different. And so you look at these Everest movies from today depicting, these incredible feats that people are doing, but the technology is so much different today. The technology then, they were not even allowed walkie-talkies because Nepal, it was a controlled item because of the revolution in Nepal. So as a Nepali team, they were not even allowed to have walkie-talkies, much less sophisticated weather instruments, one of my advisors on the film is Dawa Yangsim Sherpa. She's the most famous contemporary Sherpa woman climber. She's like the Rolex climber, North Face climber. She's incredible. But she was at my Santa Barbara premiere and she was showing me, all of the stuff that they have, all the instrumentation that they rely on now. So it's much safer, honestly, to climb Everest today than it was in 1993.
The weather reports alone are game changer.
They were like, oh, there's a black cloud coming from the Tibet side. And it was literally that. And then they were surprised by this storm. That would never happen today.
Yeah. Can you tell me about the team, that was brought together to make this film? You have a wonderful editing team. These are some heavy hitters. Your DP has done a lot of work. Building this team, how did you do it? Who was kind of the catalyst for figuring out how you were going to bring this team together? And what does it mean to have the backing of some really hard players? This feels like an important film to everyone involved.
I feel humble. Number one, because being a first-time filmmaker, I sort of felt my way along. I started at the very beginning asking, some trusted friends, documentary filmmakers in the Bay Area to be my advisory team. So Pat Ferrero, she founded the Mendocino Film Festival. She taught a lot of the people that are documentary filmmakers today. Will Paranello, these are local people who were super helpful to me. Rick Tejada Flores is also a Bay Area filmmaker, and he was friends with my brother-in-law, Dorji, and they actually went to Nepal in the late 90s because Dorji wanted to make a film, and so he knew Rick through his wife, or now his ex-wife, and so Rick got his buddy Vicente Franco, another incredible cinematographer, and they went and they shot some interviews. Now, they came back, they got, I think, $10,000, and they went and they shot these interviews, which is incredible that they did, because Sonam, Pasang's husband, widower, he wouldn't talk on camera after that, and they were able to get him on camera, and those are the interviews that I use in the film. Okay. But Rick couldn't get any more funding, and so he just put these tapes. He didn't even view the tapes. He put them in a box and put it up on a shelf, and that's where they stayed. And so when Dorji told me this story so many years later, he said, "Yeah, well, we have film, we have all this Nepali TV footage of her funeral, but we've never seen it, actually." And so I went, Dorji talked to Rick, and then I went over and had lunch with Rick in Berkeley, and he was, I think, a little surprised, but incredibly gracious, and gave me the material and said, the only thing I ask is that if you don't finish, that you give it back to me. and of course I was very determined to finish, but that's how it started. And then, my first editor, Richard Levine, was just amazing, and he took it a ways, but then things happened, and then I brought on Sari Gilman. Sari's an incredible editor, and she was the one who said, "Nancy, the reason that you haven't finished this film, because I had a rough cut, and it just wasn't good enough. It just there and she said, you have to go back to Nepal." And I said, I know I do, but you need more material, and so it was really at her urging that I made my last trip to Nepal, my last production trip, which is when I got those amazing interviews of the two Sherpa who were with her when she died, and that really did make the film. Sari had to exit during COVID for some personal reasons, and Sharon Wood, who really is the person who brought the whole team together. Sharon is an amazing writer, producer, director in her own right. In San Francisco, has made many films. She said, I think we can. Let's ask Jeffrey. Let's ask. My good. She wrote a book with Jeffrey. She did several films with him, Jeffrey Friedman. And he watched the rough cut, and he said, "Yeah, I'll come in." We talked. We had a couple meetings, and so I landed Jeffrey Friedman, which is pretty amazing. And he's the guy who worked the magic in terms of that last climb, and making that sort of smoke and mirrors make sense, because there was no footage. They lost the camera when they died. The camera was with with Pasang and Sonam Searing when they died. And so there was literally nothing. And they didn't have an expensive, photographer on the expedition. It was a very, very bare bones expedition anyway. So, Jeffrey was really amazing. Of course, then I had Todd Buckelhide as my composer, there's this little posse of incredibly talented Bay Area filmmakers. And he just wrote this amazing score that is so understated. When all the temp music, when I had all the temp music in there, it was like it was so much music. It was wall-to-wall music. And he's like, "Yeah, you don't need that much music. It'll be much more effective if there's a lot more silence in here." And anyway, so he came on board. And Martina, you mentioned Martina Radwan. She's just amazing. She came with me on my last shoot, and watching her with the Nepali crew. I mean, I had a production team there, and my fixer in Nepal, and is a documentary filmmaker in his own right, Tsering Ritar Sherpa. He has a production house, and but Martina she's badass. I mean, she just was telling all those men what to do, and she was pretty amazing, and she had some really wonderful ideas of her own, and that's one of the things that, I mean, I've always in my previous career, in this career, I mean, it's really important to me to lean on people who are experts, and to I mean, of course, I have a vision. I always had a vision for this film, and very high standards, and a lot of persistence and hard work and all of that. But really taking advice from and ideas from these incredible artists, is what made this beautiful film. So.
I'm curious. My girlfriend, she went to Kathmandu. She tried to scale Everest, didn't get all the way up, but scaled parts of it. But hearing the stories of just going into Kathmandu and the experience of being in that place, and then working your way up to where you actually get to the Sherpa community, and that trek alone itself is really interesting. What was your personal experience of getting to go to Nepal, and can you share with us just your view of what it was like there now in a modern time, getting to be there now today?
Well, as a part of this film, I went 3 times, but the first trip was really about building a relationship with the family, because I really wanted Dawa, Pasang's daughter, to be a central piece of the film. And when I first met her, she'd never talked about her mom to anybody. I mean, it was something that she just, after her mom died, the kids were sent to boarding school in India, and not too long after that, her father remarried, and they just never had the opportunity to grieve. And she was only 12, but so certainly part of going to Nepal for me was about getting to know the family and getting them to trust me enough, especially Dawa, to talk to me and to talk to me on camera. I mean, certainly Nepal itself is an amazing place. It's not an easy place to travel. It's hard travel. And the first time I took my kids, though, I mean, my kids were 5. My husband came, and I went with my sister and Dorji, and I brought my 5-year-olds, and we trekked up, and not super high, but up to Tengboche, which is about 14,000 feet.
That's not a small feat, by the way.
So yeah, it was just, I felt like it was really a privilege, because I had the relationships with the family, and that did open a lot of doors. Certainly they helped me. Dorji helped me more than anyone. My brother-in-law, he went on all 3 trips, and was very good about introducing me to people and finding places for us to stay and all that sort of thing. And so I in making the film, I mean, one of the things that I was always very aware of was the fact that I was a white woman making a film about a Sherpa woman, and so it just was very, very important to me that I had Nepali people working on the film, that I had a Sherpa perspective, and so we made the decision that we didn't want to have a narrator. We didn't want to have. I interviewed so many people. I mean, I have a lot of material, and a lot of people, Western climbers, male climbers, Western female climbers, lots of Nepali climbers who didn't know her, and experts, and I felt, in the end, and Sharon and I talked about this so much, that we just really felt that the story has to be told, from a Sherpa perspective, and so all the people in the film are people who are somehow directly related to Pasang. They knew her, they were related to her, they have a family connection to her.
What did it mean to have the film accepted here at Bentonville? What was that experience like, getting the call or the email that you knew you were going to be a part of it, knowing what Gina, Wendy, what the foundation is trying to do with this and showcase not just women filmmakers, but diverse filmmakers, but all of the different people behind the camera? I mean, like you talked about earlier, the Woman Strong on your film alone is pretty powerful. Some huge names, some badass women with your cinematographer alone. I'm curious, what does that mean to you to be at a festival that is honoring that, looks for films like this that aren't always showcased and seen?
Wow, it's been an amazing experience, for sure. I for the longest time, I really didn't feel like a filmmaker. I mean, because it's very intimidating as somebody. I didn't go to film school. I didn't, you talk to all these people here. It's super impressive. They've been doing this since they were young, and I have been learning it like on the job, and so the call was incredible. I mean, I felt thrilled to be asked to be a part of this, and the thing is, this is such a unique festival, and I had the opportunity to be on that panel with Gina, the "If She Can See It, She Can Be It" panel, and that is like the whole message of Pasang. I mean, the inspiration that she is to other young women. Every young woman climber that I talked to cited Pasang as her inspiration, because I mean, she did something at a time when it really wasn't allowed, and there's a certain, I see that in so many people on my crew, and even in myself, that this is something that I didn't grow up doing, and so to be recognized, to have the opportunity to have this film and the story and the mission of this film shared publicly and embraced by this festival is just an incredible gift, and I'm so grateful.
So I've got to ask, now that you've done this, now that you've conquered this, now that you made a really good film, and I'm not just saying that because you're here, having seen a lot of films, I was amazed by her story and the way you were able to tell it. I'm curious, will we be seeing more from you down the line? Are you looking for other projects? Do you have more stories to tell already in your mind? And is there any extensions potentially of Pasang's story and getting even more in depth to that? I guess I'm just asking, what's next?
Well, given that it took 10 plus years to make the film, I am going to take a little time and enjoy having people see it, and see it on a big screen. So I've had a couple, several wonderful festival experiences, and I, will continue that, I think, through the rest of this year. It's really important to me before I move on to another project, because I do want to move on to another project. It feels I don't think I'm quite ready for that, just stamina wise and money fundraising wise. But it's really important for me to get the film in front of women and girls in Nepal, and not just. I mean, we're hoping to to be in the Kathmandu International Film Festival, which is in December. But more than that, there are girls all over the country out in the village. I mean, the literacy rates in Nepal are appallingly low among women. There's still trafficking issues, obviously, with women in Nepal, and the whole "if she can see it, she can be it" message. I mean, to see, and they might know of Pasang. I mean, certainly, girls in the Himalayas do. I mean, but on the flatlands, dominated by the Hindu population, they will have heard of Pasang, but they won't necessarily know her story. And so that I am putting together an impact campaign where we will take the story and make sure that women and girls get to see it. So that's first, and hopefully that will happen in 2023, which is the 30th anniversary of her summit. And beyond that, this idea I founded when I started this whole journey. The very first thing I did was what I knew how to do, which is the business stuff, and I founded Follow Your Dream Foundation, which is a 501c3, and so I could raise my own money. And the theme of that is telling stories about women that people don't know, women who of color, women from marginalized communities, women who've done courageous things that need to be brought forward. So there are other potential projects out there, and but I'm just really enjoying taking Pasang to audiences and letting them experience the film as it should be on the big screen.
Well, Nancy, thank you for that, but also thank you for chatting with us. It's been a pleasure, and I hope more and more people see this. It's a beautiful tribute to a wonderful person. Thank you.
Thank you so much.